guys. Welcome everybody to the Deeper Dive presented by Awesemo.com. I'm Alex Baker, joined today by Adam Scherer, aka Ship My Money DFS. Adam, how are you doing today, man?
Doing good. Pretty interesting baseball slate to talk about, I think.
Definitely, yeah. I think we might have to do a DD on some of these pitchers. Short for a deeper dive or due diligence, depending on who you ask in the industry here. Now, we are sponsored by SuperDraft. SuperDraft has the multiplier format, and that allows you to pick whoever you want every single night in your lineups. And they also have a lot of overlay, and their lock time today is 7:30. So after you enter any lineups on DraftKings or FanDuel, make sure to jump over to SuperDraft. Now, the slate today, we kind of talked about how there's not many good pitchers, and it's kind of what you'd expect on like this day, which is it the fifth day of the season, where now we're getting the back end of the starting rotation. And one thing about tonight's slate, FanDuel locks at 6:40 p.m., DraftKings locks at 7:05, and then SuperDraft at 7:30. So we got a different set of games for each site, so that'll affect the strategy a little bit. But let's start with we got Atlanta at Tampa Bay. Now, this is a matchup between Yonny Chirinos and Kyle Wright, two of the premier pitchers in the MLB, right? So, yeah. So Yonny Chirinos, he's a guy that he's a little stretched out, so maybe you go deep in the game, but Atlanta these days has a very strong lineup. So it's kind of a situation where I might have to copy someone else and call this a Manny special for me. But Adam, how are you feeling about this Atlanta-Tampa Bay game?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tough spot. Obviously it's favorable pitching conditions in Tampa Bay, though the ball is just absolutely flying everywhere. So I'm not sure how much that really matters. There was a tweet that came out an hour or so ago that Tampa Bay was going to go basically inning by inning with Chirinos. So basically the same wording they used with Tyler Glasnow yesterday. Glasnow ended up going 4 innings, 75 or 72 pitches. So I think if you're expecting somewhere in that 75 to 80 pitch range for Chirinos, that's pretty reasonable. Like you said, though, it is a tough lineup against Atlanta. And on FanDuel, which is the slate that this game is on, you do have the bonus for quality starts, which means that you go 6 innings. Wins are a little bit more important, meaning you need to go at least 5. So I think that there's a little bit more value in going, if you can find them at least, which is tough on this slate, guys that aren't on any sort of a inning by inning limit or anything like that.
Yeah, so maybe on FanDuel, like these guys wouldn't be really the standout pitchers because you only get one. You got to make it count. And then as far as stacks, let's see. We got. I'll just give these numbers for FanDuel because it's the only site with this this game. So Tampa Bay 3% top stack percent, Atlanta 2.4%, both coming in 1%. Yesterday, we saw a bunch of the chalk or the contrarian stacks really come through for us. So how are you feeling about maybe taking a flyer on some of these guys?
I think Tampa is the more interesting of the two teams. Obviously, the Braves have a lot of really appealing bats, but Kyle Wright, a prospect, but still hasn't shown it really at the major league level yet. And you do have power on this Tampa team, especially batting fourth at only 2,800. Tsutsugo, he hasn't hit well so far early in the season, but pretty much every projection site has him projected for an ISO around 220, and he's still really cheap. He's someone that if he does live up to his potential, his salary is going to be much higher by the end of the year than it is right now. So I think he really stands out as a value. But then guys like Brandon Lau, G-Man Choi, Jose Martinez, they do still have power throughout this team. So I think that they're not a primary stack because there are so many bad pitchers on this slate, so many spots to go to. But I do think that they're a little underpriced for their upside here.
Yeah, Yoshi Tsutsugo, one of my favorite guys to roster so far this year, especially that day where he was 2K on DraftKings. So fond memories of that 0 I got for my 2K. We'll follow through these first 2 games because they're FanDuel only. Chicago at Cincinnati. this one. High over under of 10.5. Alec Mills versus Tyler Mahle. Mahle gets a decent amount of strikeouts, but the matchup versus the Cubs is pretty poor. So, do you see any value in this game?
I think it's pretty tough to get to either pitcher. Tyler Mahle is someone that I do like in general, but not really the spot that I want to go to when you have, heat and humidity in Cincinnati where the ball absolutely flies, and you're talking about a Cubs lineup that has so much power and most of it coming from the left side. I think it's pretty tough to get to him in this spot.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely agree because 5.5 team total against them. And versus the Cubs, they strike out a little bit less than average. So the spot from this game I'm really looking at are the Reds bats, just because they're super cheap on FanDuel. But because there's no spend up option at pitcher, they might go under the radar a little bit. I have them for 5% ownership. Do you see yourself going to the Reds at all?
Yeah, I think that both sides of this game look good from an offensive standpoint. I think that's a really good point about people tend to still want to use up their entire salary cap, and when pricing is really soft, which is often the case early in the season, and is certainly the case on FanDuel right now, especially in baseball. Basketball is one thing; like your more expensive players are going to do better than your cheaper guys, a lot. But in baseball, when you're talking about hitters, that's really not the case. So you can naturally be contrarian by just playing two good stacks that happen to leave money on the table when they're combined together. So I think that's a good point about the Reds. And then looking at the Cubs side, they have 6 left-handed hitters in this lineup, including 4 in the top 6. Last season, Tyler Mahle allowed a 248 ISO to left-handed hitters. So you're in a park that plays up power. And then you have guys like Rizzo and Schwarber and Happ in this lineup in a good spot.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely agree that the Cubs seem pretty interesting, and the Reds as well. So this will definitely be a game I'll have some flyers on and FanDuel. So now that we've kind of gotten the formalities out of the way, the first 2 games, let's talk about some general strategy real quick before we dive into the rest. First of all, guys, make sure if you mind hitting that like button, that helps us out a lot under the stream if you're on YouTube. And also we have a couple of promos going on. Restart gives you 50% off your first month of all access. NBA is coming back Thursday, so there's not a better time to play some DFS. I think that's a great deal. And SuperDraft, we have the deal Awesemo 10. That gives you $10 for free on your deposit of $10 or more, or $20 on 100 or more. I don't mind free Andrew Hamilton in my pocket, so that's definitely something I'd recommend here. But Adam, what have you seen so far these first few days as far as MLB strategy? Have you noticed any differences in 2020 or just general thoughts on the field?
I think strategy-wise, it's been pretty much the same. I do think that it seems like ownership's been really concentrated on some stacks. Yesterday, for example, you had basically 0 good pitchers going, almost 0. And you still got, I think there were 3 teams, the Red Sox, the Royals, and the Astros on DraftKings that had like 20+% ownership across all of their main players. So it does give you the opportunity, especially in large field tournaments, to go to these lower owned stacks that still have really high ceilings. It seems like, at least as of right now, people aren't really getting away from the top projected teams.
Yeah, definitely. We saw that yesterday where just kind of random teams went off. We had the Rays that they play indoors, so they're never really the top stack of the night, but then they just had an absurd performance. And then the Chiefs had a ton of runs and a couple other teams as well. So it just shows that some of these teams that aren't necessarily in as good a spot really do have that potential. So they're definitely worth looking at. So we'll highlight some of those sleepers as we go along here, especially on SuperDraft too, where you get a multiplier, so that increases the potential of the underdogs even more. All right, so we got this Milwaukee at Pittsburgh game. Milwaukee is a 180 road favorite with Josh Lindblom on the mound, but this is a guy that he's definitely worth looking at in DFS because he's cheap, and the downside is also very obvious, where the Brewers really rely on their bullpen as much as any other team. So you can't really count on Lindblom to go deep, but he's a big favorite against Pittsburgh. So how are you feeling about Lindblom on this slate?
I'm definitely interested in him, especially on DraftKings, 2-pitcher sites, because DraftKings, not only do you have to roster 2 pitchers on a slate that leaves a lot to be desired at the position, but they really priced up every pitcher that you could conceivably say is good, with the exception of Lindblom, who had success in Korea over the last few years. He projects by most systems for around 8 strikeouts per 9 innings, which is perfectly fine, especially for someone at his price point. And you have one of the lower implied run totals on the slate for Pittsburgh. So I think that kind of the lack of opportunity cost at the position lowers the risk that you're taking in going to someone who hasn't pitched in American professional baseball in a few years. And the salary makes it so there's still a lot of upside for him, especially relative to the other pitchers on the slate, since pretty much everyone has legitimate question marks.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Now that we have some context on the Korean League where he was at, we kind of know like strikeouts are a little bit hard to come by in the Korea League. The average strikeout rate is a lot lower, and Lindblom was in the low 20s, I believe. So
he was 24.4% last year.
Nice. So that would probably correspond to a good rate in the MLB as well. So I think at the price, he's worth looking at. Derek Holland, I thought he was going to be good, but then Mike Campbell in the chat, he said Derek Holland is trash versus everyone. So because they're playing someone, now I'm off him. But Adam, what do you think about Holland?
Yeah, pretty scary spot for him, I think, going up against the Milwaukee right-handed power. He's someone that I kind of got on when he was in San Francisco at times. He's always kind of seemed like he should be better than he is, but going up against a bunch of righties here, he last season allowed a 324 ISO to right-handed hitters. You have Lorenzo Cain, Keston Hiura, Ryan Braun, Jericho, Garcia. There's 8 righties in the lineup for Milwaukee. So I think that Milwaukee's bats are much more appealing than Holland is, but it does also look like Milwaukee's expected to get a lot of ownership.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm expecting, just because it's like there's only one expensive guy on all the sites, which is Yelich. He's like the most expensive bat on the slate. So it's like all the other guys are really cheap and they have the second highest team total. So it just seems like any way you build your lineup, whether it's hand building or optimizing, is going to give you a ton of Brewers. And they all have good power. I mean, obviously Yelich is a fantastic player. In fact, like maybe it's even a little bit contrarian to put him in because he is the worst value on the team. But they are going to be the 3rd highest owned stack of the day, according to my ownership projections. So definitely if you're going to play Milwaukee, you probably want to pair them with a contrarian pitcher or another contrarian stack. So are there any bats you're particularly looking at on the Brewers?
Yeah, I think that, pretty much, like I said, any right-handed power. Braun, obviously at the later stages of his career, but still can take advantage of this matchup. Keston Hiura, probably one of my favorite second base plays. He's a prospect for Milwaukee, high strikeout numbers, but also a lot of power. And you're talking about a pitcher in Holland that struck out 23% of righties last year, but gave up all the power, like I had said before. So I think Hiura looks good. And then Judd Jericho is a really good value at 2,700, but that should get him a lot of ownership.
Nice. We got some news in the chat. Everyone's talking about how Walker Buehler is limited to 75 pitches officially. So we'll get to that. He should get around 4 to 5 innings, depending on how efficient he is, if that is the case. So as far as Pittsburgh, not as exciting a stack because they're at home and they're big underdogs. In fact, they're my second worst stack of the day, but nobody's going to have them either. So do you see any diamonds in the rough on the Pittsburgh side?
Not really. You have a pretty good bullpen in Milwaukee. You have a pitcher in Lindblom who I expect to be pretty good. And then it's just really tough to like a whole lot from the Pirates. It would be one thing if good stacks on this slate were priced up, but for the most part, they're pretty affordable. And so it's tough to get there when really the only true power in the lineup is Josh Bell. Obviously, you had 2 home runs last night from Colin Moran, but that's not something that you really expect to happen all that often. So I just think with the favorable pricing on other teams, obviously it makes it so nobody's going to the Pirates. But I think that you can get to contrarian stacks that are just better than the Pirates are.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, going to the second to worst stack just because they're low on probably isn't. It's not a horrible strategy, but it's probably not like the best lineup you can make. So that wouldn't really be something I recommend. Now, we do have the ownership projections free today. So if you're not an Awesemo member and you're interested in what that's like, make sure to head over to that page. But I'll just look at some of these projections for this game and reference them. So Lindblom is projected to be the second highest owned pitcher on DraftKings at 29%. So, I mean, he's priced well, but and he's facing the second lowest team total of the day. So,
and on DraftKings, I would, if I was playing across 150 lineups, I'd get to 29% Lindblom. So I think that's pretty much where it should be.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because today, like, there's so much so bad pitching that, like, Lindblom, I've been projected for 10 points. And obviously, like, at that range, like, half the pitchers in the field have a projection of at least that. So that is a spot where you could pivot, but 29% isn't, like, super aggressive. So I wouldn't necessarily avoid him.
Yeah. In general, I do think it's a good slate on DraftKings to be pretty spread out amongst your pitching because so many of these guys do project within a point or two of each other.
Yeah, definitely. If you're getting really excited about any pitcher on this slate, you might want to rethink the way you're approaching it. So this is definitely one where you can mix it up. Now, there's a ton of variance in pitching because, I mean, the number of hits, walks they give up. I mean, each guy is getting on base about 30%, 40% of the time, depending on how good they are. So there's a ton of variance in how many guys get on base. And on this slate where strikeouts are going to be hard to come by, that's going to be what determines who has the highest score of the night. And pretty much any pitcher that's stretched out has that potential to get lucky. So Lindblom may be a good percentage play, but definitely not someone that you can really count on, in my opinion. So definitely spreading it around. We got Cleveland White Sox double header today. I don't think that game's on any of the slates, so we'll skip that. I will mention the weather because that game was postponed yesterday. I haven't really seen anything on weather that's super concerning today, so that's not really something I'm factoring in, but I'll keep an eye on it. Kansas City at Detroit. We got 2 new guys, Kyle Zimmer versus Ronnie Garcia. The pitching in this game, we can pretty much cross off because Zimmer is limited to 50 pitches. Ronnie Garcia, he was supposed to be part of the bullpen to start the season, and they said he's going to go about 3 innings from what I read. So are you crossing these guys off?
Yeah, neither guy expected to go deep enough for me to want to get to them.
Yeah, so that's an easy way to avoid a dud. So make sure to X those guys out. I don't think you get to them if you're using our projections anyway, but because the pitching isn't good in this game, the bats are really, really standing out. In fact, Kansas City is my highest owned stack today, projected on DraftKings. And they have the 3rd highest probability of being the top stack. And to top it all off, they are all really, really cheap across the industry. Pretty much like 3 points per dollar on DraftKings, like 4 to 5 on FanDuel. So I think the ownership is going to be really aggressive on this game. And they're also in a way better spot than they were yesterday if you look at these run totals. So how are you handling the Royals here?
Yeah, I think it's kind of tricky because I do expect the ownership to be really high, like you said, because for one, they're going to project really well. They're going to get into a lot of lineups if you're just using an optimizer without really changing settings. but people are going to gladly go back to them as well after a lot of these guys were 20 to 30% owned last night and had a monster game. And then now you're in an even better spot, like you said. So I do expect huge ownership here. And I think it is obviously a really good spot. The top of the order with Merrifield, Soler, Mondesi, and Perez, these guys are actually pretty good. So it's not like it's a terrible team that's getting a lot of ownership. But once you get past them, you start to get to some below average hitters towards the bottom of that order. So it's not, I always get concerned. I mean, obviously in baseball, whenever a stack is getting a lot of ownership, you can get away from them because it's baseball, but especially so when you're talking about a pretty average team in Kansas City. So, I think that they're a good, they project well. If you're contrarian elsewhere in your lineup, feel free to go, but they're not my favorite stack just because of how much ownership I expect them to get.
Yeah, it's really interesting because they objectively are by far the best play as far as points per dollar on the slate. So the higher or the smaller field tournaments you play generally are the tougher tournaments as well. So those are going to have even more Royals lineups. Pretty much you can stack the Royals with any other team. So people are going to have Royals, Mets, Royals, Red Sox, Royals, whatever you name it. So that could be a potential pivot point tonight that I'm looking at. But as you mentioned, there's some really good guys. The other strategy that's really been trending in the industry is people are talking about these bottom of the order stacks because they seem to have performed really well in recent slates. So let's talk about the bottom of the order stacks really quick because obviously a little bit unconventional, but how do you handle the batting order and maybe some of the guys at the bottom?
Yeah, I mean, it's more useful, I think, on teams like the Red Sox are a team that I like to do it on because 1 through 9, typically they have a good lineup. And so on some of those slates where the Red Sox are in a great spot, but everyone's playing the same, 5 or 6 Red Sox, I like going to the bottom. I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about a team like Kansas City because there's just not as much talent there. The top of the order for Kansas City is good. The bottom of the order is several below average hitters. So you're starting to roster some pretty bad players when to win a tournament, you really need home runs too. So I think it's really dependent on the team and the depth of the lineup in general.
That's a good way to put it because this Royals lineup is a great example where Oscar Hernandez and Brett Phillips really are quite below average hitters, especially neither of them really have power. Brett Phillips has some stolen base upside, so maybe he has that GP potential. But Oscar Hernandez, he's 2K, he's a catcher, so people are going to have this guy in their Kansas City stacks, and you do need a catcher, but this just screams a guy that maybe you could fade. Get a little bit contrarian by fading the bottom of the lineup, but. Actually, now I'm thinking about Salvador Perez also is probably a catcher. So I'm not sure if he's DHing and they changed that, but I think that you're getting too cute if you're stacking the bottom of the order because really it's all about the at-bats. The RBI run stacking is important, but when they go from 4 to 5 at-bats because the team puts up 10 runs, that's 25% additional performance on average. So that's one of the huge benefits of stacking. Honestly, I don't really worry about the batting order at all when I build my lineups, but it's going to be the other factors I'm worrying about, like the ownership of each player. On this particular team, it looks like because Salvador Perez and Oscar Hernandez play the same position, maybe that decreases the ownership of both of them. So there are some other factors at play here. So always worth thinking about all the angles. Tigers, we got a pretty good team total versus Kansas City. Kyle Zimmer is not really someone we're scared of. Another good value stack, but do you see any reason to really lock it on the Tigers?
Right now, we have them projected to be a little bit over-owned, which I think makes sense because, again, it's a game where you're just expecting a lot of runs to be scored. You have Kyle Zimmer on a pitch limit, and then you have whatever garbage comes out of the Kansas City bullpen behind them. So, and it's a really cheap Tigers team. So, again, I think it's going to be a team that pops into optimized lineups, but it's also not a very good team. When you look at power in this lineup, you look at the hitters, CJ Cron's fine, Kristen Stewart's okay. Scope is a decent second base option, but overall, you're really sacrificing power upside that you can get from some of the other teams that we'll get to later on. And there's no pitching to really pay up for.
Yeah, you really can't benefit from the value as much as you could on a normal night. But maybe worth taking a look at if they come in under-owned. I'm going to just pull up all the ownership because it's free today. They're actually one of the most popular teams on DraftKings and FanDuel, coming in at between 7 and 8%. So that could be a team where they're a little bit higher owned than their chances of success tonight. That is something I'm looking for when I'm doing a team fade. So is that how you'd interpret those numbers too?
Yep.
Okay. All right, we just got the Reds lineup, so we got all the early lineups now. I'll be updating projections in a sec. New York at Boston, the highest over-under the night at 11.5. I mean, it's at Fenway, so you got great park to play in addition to no-name pitchers with Matt Hall and David Peterson. So first of all, I'll just throw this question to you, man. Like, what the heck is going on with the Red Sox? Because the team seems a lot worse than it has been in previous years.
Yeah, I mean, a really, really thin rotation for them. So kind of just running arms out there that you normally wouldn't see going for the Red Sox, that's for sure.
Yeah, so Matt Hall, I don't think he's had a major league start before. I have him projected to be a little bit better than average in strikeouts, but he's going up against the team that has the highest team total of the night in the Mets. So I kind of think Matt Hall could be a really high variance flyer that you could consider versus a chalk team. He is supposed. I read an article today that said he could go 5 innings. So he isn't a guy that's necessarily going to be pulled after a couple if he's pitching well. So what are you expecting from Matt Hall today?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's a high variance play because it's a tough matchup against the Mets. You obviously don't really know what to expect from him, but his strikeout stuff has been good. In the majors, like you said, he's only been a reliever. But if you go back to 2018, he made 10 starts at AAA, struck out 9.3 per 9. In 2017, he struck out around 10 hitters per 9 at AA and high A. So you don't have any sort of sample size at the major leagues of him being able to do it as a starter, but he at least put up numbers in the minors. So I agree that there is the potential for strikeouts there. I don't think that I know I won't be getting there on this slate. I'd rather go to the Mets side of it, but there is at least some strikeouts in his arm.
Nice. So if you get lucky and you have Matt Hall, you could have a big night. So that's going to come down to ownership for me. And what I have here, I have him projected for 1.8% ownership right now. So I think that maybe he's worth taking some flyers on. I have him as a 10% chance to be one of the top 2 pitchers because this slate is so bad at pitching, and 29% to be a top value. So maybe a little bit off the board play with Matt Hall. David Peterson on the other side, pretty much similar caliber pitcher, but he just doesn't get as many strikeouts, and I'm not really on him for that reason. But do you see any value in Peterson?
No, I mean, a little bit more expensive too, and then going up against this Red Sox lineup, former first-round pick in 2017 for the Mets. So the pedigree's there. He struck out 24.5% of hitters at AA last year, but he's never pitched above AA. And then now you have to go in and face a lot of right-handed power bats in Fenway Park. So pretty scary spot for him.
Definitely. So not a pick for the timid, and probably not one that I might be looking at tonight. All right, guys. So we got a special NBA promo going on. If you're interested in the NBA package, promo code is BUBBLE. And we have a show at 7:30 tonight with all your favorite guys talking about the NBA coming back to play. So make sure to tune into that. I'll definitely be checking that out. And we also have a podcast giveaway where if you go to the pin tweet on awesemo.com Twitter, you will get the info for how to get an Awesemo monthly pass or a chance at that. So make sure to check that out. We got St. Louis at Minnesota. Pretty much every game here today is like good for bats. It seems like Carlos Martinez is a guy that he's been pretty decent at fantasy in past years, but he's pretty much lost most of his value as the years have gone on. Homer Bailey, pretty much the same thing, where he's had flashes of brilliance, but these guys are actually some of the more expensive guys of the night. And the over-under of this game is like 10.5. Both lineups pretty solid. So how are you handling pitching in St. Louis versus Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, if the pitching was cheaper, I'd have a little bit more interest. Martinez, I think, is volatile, at least. Like, we don't really know what to expect from him. He used to be a good starting pitcher, and then he fell off. Now he says he's back. Last year, the strikeout stuff was still there, but it's obviously a brutal matchup against a Minnesota lineup with tons of power. They're tough to strike out. They have a near 6 implied run total. So it's not really set up as a good spot for Martinez, and you're paying up for him. And then on the other side, Homer Bailey is someone that in the past, when he's in that 6K range, I tend to think he's more talented than most of the pitchers around him. But now he's at 9K, where you're paying a premium for a guy that last season struck out 20% of righties, 23% of lefties. He did do a good job last year of limiting power, which is something that he had an issue with in the past. He started throwing his splitter a bit more last year, and that's a pitch that gets a lot of swings and misses for him, and did a pretty good job limiting power. But I still have trouble paying that price tag for him.
Yeah, same. The strikeout matchup for Bailey isn't particularly good because the Cardinals strike out about an average rate with their lineup today. Strikeout matchup is a little bit better for Carlos Martinez, but he's going up against a team that was one of the highest totals of the night. So tough to find pitching in this game. So let's go to the bats. The St. Louis lineup seems like they're always projected pretty good. They're just about average power, which in this day and age, solid. But not like really a standout in any particular metric. But how are you handling St. Louis today?
I have interest in St. Louis. I think that they're a decent pivot to Kansas City. Obviously, they have a lower chance of success, but they also have much lower ownership, and the pricing is similar. Outside of Edman at 4,500 and Goldschmidt at 4,500, the rest of this team's under 4K, and there's still plenty of power in there with guys like Paul DeJong, Matt Carpenter. Yachty covers the catcher position perfectly fine. So not as high a probability team, but I think it looks like they're going a little bit under-owned here against the pitcher in Bailey, who has a track record of being inconsistent at best.
Yeah, I think that it's a good call. Kind of a contrarian stack that might not be on people's radars today. So, I mean, they're going up against a decent pitcher in Homer Bailey, so not really lighting up that category. They're not cheap. And I actually like they got the first two batters, Wong and Edman, have good stolen bases, and then Goldschmidt, DeJong, and Carpenter all have good power. And then at the bottom of the lineup, they got some good players too. So good individual talents. So I think that they're definitely a go-to stack today. Minnesota, obviously a team that has like really, really strong power bats. Pretty much everyone in their lineup today hits homers except for Arias. So do you think you're going to end up on a lot of Twins?
I think it's a pretty decent spot. Their pricing is a lot cheaper than you would expect as well. Not really getting to much of them, though. I'm not really sure what the reason is. We have them projected to be lower owned than they should. We have them as a top 5 stack. So I certainly wouldn't be upset if between now and lock I start to get more. But as of right now, I'm not really getting there.
Nice. Yeah, I think that as far as value, like they're one of the worst values of the high projected stacks. So that would be a reason why maybe you wouldn't end up on them. Is just they're overpriced. And it doesn't seem like they're getting like really low ownership. I have them averaged around 7% of the total ownership tonight. So maybe there's some decent value here as far as a contrariness, but it might not be exceptional in either category. So
yeah, so I think for me, like looking at the teams around them in the top stack tool, I think it's just that I'm getting to Boston, I'm getting to the Dodgers, I'm getting to the Cardinals, and they're kind of just getting filtered out.
Nice. Yeah, so a high upside team, but maybe not tonight. It's not like the optimal night to target them. Let's go to Arizona at Texas. So Texas, this game surprisingly has an over-under of 9. So I assume that Globe Life Stadium this year has become more of a pitcher's park now that they're closing the roof because it's so hot. And Merrill Kelly and Kyle Gibson apparently are some of the best pitchers on the slate because they have obscenely high price tags. So I'm not really thinking I'll go to them, but how about you? Do you see any value in these guys?
Yeah, I think this is one of the more appealing games for pitching because the roof's closed, and on top of that, both of these pitchers are fully stretched out. Merrill Kelly, coming into the season, Diamondbacks said that all of their starters were stretched out enough to go 90-plus pitches. Kyle Gibson threw 84 pitches in his last exhibition outing. Obviously, neither pitcher is great, but in the context of the slate, they're better than average, I think. Neither offense is bad, but neither one is great either. You do have strikeouts in the Texas lineup at the top. I wish that if there were more righties in the lineup for Arizona, I would like it a lot more for Kyle Gibson, but only three righties in the lineup. Last year, he had pretty big splits, 25% strikeout percentage against righties, only 20% to lefties. So I think that hurts his projection a little bit. And then Kelly himself, just not a high strikeout pitcher, which is scary when you go against the Rangers because you talk about guys like Shin-Soo Choo and Joey Gallo that have high strikeout percentages, but also have tons of power when they make contact. And then you look at someone like Merrill Kelly that pitches to contact. So it is still a really scary spot for both pitchers. I think that it's just in the context of the slate, I would feel better about either of them than about a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, Kyle Gibson, like he seems like that decently above average pitcher as far as strikeouts and run prevention. Last year's xFIP was 3.8, so that it's quite solid. But I'm seeing this Diamondbacks lineup actually is like surprising me in how good it is. Every single batter has power, and I can't remember if it's projected or confirmed. So I'm just looking at that.
It's confirmed.
Confirmed.
Yeah.
So like every single batter can hit home runs. They also don't strike out as much as the league average. So like usually when you get the home run power, you get more strikeouts. But today with the Diamondbacks, not the case. So maybe a team that's going to be sneaky good this year. I didn't really see them having that kind of projection, but just not really one guy really standing out, but I think they could be a decent contrarian stack because they are expensive too. But do you see any value in the Diamondbacks, or are you more interested in Gibson?
No, I agree with you that they're a pretty good contrarian stack. When I'm looking through the lineups I made, if I start to rank them more for large field tournaments, factoring leverage and ownership in a little bit more, they're one of the first teams that starts to kind of pop up because they're not getting much ownership. And while they're not a really high probability stack, they do have power, like you said. They do have a lot of left-handed bats, which is a weakness for Gibson. So they're a team that I don't think really plays in smaller field tournaments. I think that you can be contrarian without going all the way to them. But in large field, top-heavy tournaments, I do think they have the upside at 1 or 2% ownership to get there.
Nice. My general rule of thumb is if a team has a team total of somewhere close to 5, in this case, the Diamondbacks are 4.9. That's pretty good. Like in today's game, not quite as impressive, but a couple of years ago, that would have been like about an average team. That definitely gives you the upside that you need. And they're a worse objectively ranked stack than most of the others as far as value. So I could see myself going to them. Now the Texas lineup here, they got Joey Gallo, who's got crazy home run power. They have a couple of weak spots at the bottom of the lineup. Overall, probably one of the stacks that's going to be looked over more today. How are you feeling about Texas?
Yeah, I think that Gallo individually looks really, really good. Like I said, you have Merrill Kelly with a 17% strikeout percentage, or 17.5% strikeout percentage against lefties last year, 204 expected ISO. This park seems like it's going to play more to pitchers than hitters, especially with the roof closed. But Gallo has enough power to do damage anywhere. And whenever you have a pitcher that doesn't really miss bats like Merrill Kelly, it plays to Gallo's strengths. So I really, really like Gallo individually. The rest of Texas, I think, is fine. They're Shin-Soo has some power, Calhoun has some power, but Gallo's the one that really, really stands out to me.
Nice. So definitely a guy that has the potential to win you a slate as a one-off. So do you see yourself playing him as a one-off, or do you more like stack all your teams, like double stack completely?
I mostly double stack. I'll run some teams that aren't, but for the most part, I double stack.
Nice. Yeah, my recommendation for people watching, if you're just going to build a few lineups, I would recommend double stacking them 4-4. As you get more time and more sophisticated, then building more lineups that are less stacked can be good, because you can find some ways to exploit the slate. And one of those is kind of building teams that aren't possible to improve by more stacking, just because of the salary cap and stuff. So that's always something I'm looking at. So tonight, with the pitching being so cheap, I don't know if that's going to really apply. So I think stacking might be more valuable tonight than your average night, because you don't need that flexibility with salary. All right. Dodgers at Houston. Walker Buehler, we got the news that he's pitching 75 pitches tops, but still one of my top projected pitchers, because he's well above average as far as pitching. The matchup stinks, though, versus Houston. So do you think you're going to spend up on Buehler, or is this a total trap play?
He's not someone that I guess he's in some of my top lineups. He's not in that many of my top ranked lineups right now. Across 150, I have him at like 15% on DraftKings. And I think the reasoning there is what you said. He's not, obviously you have limited upside when you're on a 75 pitch count. You can't expect a pitcher to go do what Tyler Glasnow did last night and strike out 9 guys in 4 innings. It's certainly in the range of outcomes for Buehler. He's that good, but it's a tough matchup. It's a limited ceiling because of the pitches, but most pitchers on this slate aren't throwing, probably no pitchers are throwing 100 pitches, and most of them, or none of them, are anywhere in the same talent level as Buehler. So if you're on a cheap stack and playing like Josh Lindblom or something, you can get to Buehler. The problem is that I think probably a really high percentage of Buehler lineups are going to be very similar, as far as it's going to be Buehler plus Lindblom plus Kansas City or something like that. So you'll want to be, I think, aware of what teams you're stacking him with, so that you're not kind of just playing the same builds as everyone else. But overall, I think that in terms of raw projection, he's at the top. It's just that point per dollar, he's a pretty terrible play.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. He seems like the best pitcher objectively without considering the salary cap, but once you factor that in, he kind of sinks way down, because he does funnel you into certain stacks, like you mentioned. So not really someone I'd recommend building around tonight. It's much more advantageous to get that salary flexibility, I think. There are some bats that you could target here in this game too. Let's talk about Framber Valdez. He a little bit above average strikeouts, but the Dodgers have probably the best, if not one of the best. Did I get that backwards? Anyway, lineups in the game. So really good power, bad for strikeouts. So that's making me cross off Valdez pretty much. Do you see any value in Valdez?
The only reason I'm getting to him at all is just because the rest of the slate has legitimate question marks too. I think that there's a lot of value, especially in large field tournaments, in probably being a little bit more contrarian a pitcher today than you normally end up being, just because so many guys project very close to each other within a couple points of each other. So objectively, it's a really terrible spot for all the reasons you said. But Valdez does have some of the best strikeout stuff on the slate. He is stretched out. He threw 73 pitches in an inter-squad game, and then they said that he was going to be throwing another bullpen to increase his pitch count. So I think he's as stretched out as pretty much anyone on the slate. It's certainly not something that I would want in one lineup if that's what my night's riding on. But I do think he at least has the upside at what's projected to be really low ownership to be worth a flyer in big tournaments.
I don't like it because, he doesn't really stand out as a great play, but none of the other pitchers do. And I have him projected for 8.7% ownership on DraftKings, on FanDuel 0.7%. And this is on my top pitchers tool, the probabilities of success, 12.2 on DraftKings and 4.9 on FanDuel. I don't usually like going contrarian at pitcher just because I feel like going contrarian at bats is a higher percentage play. But tonight may be an exception just because all the pitchers are so even that go into a lower owned guy like Valdez could be an advantage. So that's going to be something I'm looking to take advantage on both sides, particularly FanDuel where all the pitchers are just bunched up in one group. So there's not really much advantage you can get other than ownership, and the ownership is a lot more stacked on certain players. So make sure to check out that top pitchers tool. You can use the promo code RESTART, 50% off your first month of Platinum. So it's $45 for a month. You get NBA, MLB, WNBA, esports. What's not to love, right? So make sure to use that promo code RESTART for the Platinum. As far as bats, Dodgers and the Astros have a lot of great batters, but the conditions in this game might not be great. So how are you handling it?
Yeah, I think that it's really tough to get to Houston because as a stack, they're not super expensive. Michael Brantley hitting cleanup for 2,800 is pretty crazy. But the guys at the top that you would really want with Bregman, Altuve, Springer are really expensive, and you're facing very clearly the number one pitcher on the slate in Walker Buehler as far as talent goes. There's no shortage of bad pitchers to pick on here. And so I know the Astros are good. I know that they'll be low owned, but I think that there's going to be better low owned spots to get to. They're picking on Walker Buehler. I do have more interest in the Dodgers, who are kind of coming in the top 5 to 8 range in terms of top stack percentage. Valdez is kind of a wild card. He has decent strikeout stuff. He's really good at getting ground balls, but he's also not really proven at the major league level, and now he's going up against a ton of really good Dodgers bats. So neither team a top stack for me, but more interest in the Dodgers than the Astros.
Nice. Yeah, I like the Dodgers more as well. The fact that they're a road team gives you extra inning in a good night. Obviously, if your stack's going off, they're not going to play the ninth. They're the home team. So that's one reason to favor them. They have great power. The only thing is the park that might not be as advantageous as other ones side. So let's move on to Colorado at Oakland. We got Daniel Mengden at Antonio Senzatella. And as a theme of the night, these guys probably aren't ones you're going to be very excited about. Mengden about 16% Ks last year. Senzatella about 13%. So not a lot of upside. Oakland is a batter's park by a little bit, I'd say. So, do you see any pitching in this game?
Not that I'm not going to say that I like either pitcher. I will say that so right now we have Patrick Sandoval at 6,600 on DraftKings projected for the most ownership on the slate. Antonio Senzatella is the same price on DraftKings. He's in a good pitcher's park. It's only supposed to be around 60 degrees. He doesn't have really good strikeout stuff, but it's just another example, I think, of looking at the projected ownership. You have 44% going to Sandoval. You have 6 going to Senzatella. I think 2 going to Senzatella. So, I don't think that Sandoval beats him 19 out of 20 times. I don't know that he's still not a priority. He's still not a high upside pitcher, but I do think that if you're on kind of like a chalkier build as far as bats go, he's a good enough pivot to Sandoval.
Nice. So maybe a good 1-for-1 there if you have a chalky lineup. As far as bats, man, the Rockies look really ugly today. Pretty much really expensive for some reason. And then they're also not projected to do well. So I don't see much reason to go to them. What do you think about the Rockies tonight?
Yeah, I'm there with you. I think it's just tough to like. Obviously, they'll be low owned because they're so expensive, but I don't think the hitting conditions are favorable at all here. It's a park that doesn't play up home runs. It's cool weather, and you just have so many parks, playing outdoors in favorable weather for hitters that there's a lot of opportunity cost there. And then you look at the pitching, and Mangden's not a great pitcher, but he's also not bad. And there's a lot of just truly bad pitchers on this slate, so it's really tough for me to get to the Rockies.
Yeah, same. So definitely one I'm kind of writing off a little bit. We have Oakland, definitely a more talented team. They got above average power. But as you're saying, the conditions in the park aren't great. So how are you feeling about Oakland?
Not getting into too much of them either. I do think between the two teams, I prefer Oakland. Senzatella is not a pitcher that misses a lot of bats, and Oakland is a team with a ton of power, but the hitting conditions just really aren't favorable. The pricing on Oakland isn't anything special either. So overall, this is a game that I'm not really that interested in outside of taking some flyers on the pitching because of the park and the weather.
Yeah, so maybe a game that could go overlooked today. So the thing is, like it's going overlooked for a good reason. So let's move on to the next game. Seattle at the Angels, 9-team total. This is the game with the chalk pitcher, Patrick Sandoval. And I'd say it's because the Mariners really have a bad lineup that strikes out a good amount, not because of any talent of Sandoval himself, probably. Is that your read on it?
Kind of, yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with the lineup. I do think that Sandoval has better strikeout stuff than most pitchers on this slate, which isn't saying a ton. But last season he did strike out about 25% of hitters. He also walked 11%. But I think that he does at least have some ability, which the cheap price tag and the matchup I think is all contributing to why he's the highest owned player on the slate.
Okay, that makes sense. There's some reason to be optimistic. The betting markets have him at between 4 and 5 strikeouts, so not inspiring except today. So, I mean, this is the crux of today's decision making, where the pitchers really aren't good. So fading the most popular one could be a decent strategy. How are you going to approach Sandoval in your lineups?
Yeah, I think that for one, he's just not a good enough pitcher that I think you necessarily need to be going overweight on him if he's owned by about half the field. But on top of that, there's definitely concerns about how deep he goes into this game. He threw 55 pitches in his last time out. So even if you assume, let's say he can go 70, 75, I would think that's probably the upper limit. And there's probably a really good chance that they just pull him after like 4 innings or something like that. So, I think that the range of outcomes is pretty wide for someone getting this much ownership, which is another reason why I mentioned Senzatella as a pivot. I think Senzatella is in a bad spot. I don't think he's any good, but I think that the range of outcomes is so wide on this 45% owned pitcher that going to a lot of low owned guys makes sense in his place.
Nice. I think that could be a good strategy tonight. Like, it seems like the prime slate where going contrary in a pitcher it could be optimal. So I'm going to be looking at that. As far as bats in this game, both teams pretty mediocre. 4.4 team total for Seattle, but they're pretty cheap. For the Angels, 5.3 team total versus Justice Sheffield. How are you feeling about bats in this game?
Not too excited for them. Still waiting on the Angels lineup, which will make a difference because Anthony Rendon may or may not be in it. Obviously, Mike Trout's really good. But outside of that, it's not a great lineup. Not a ton of strikeouts. Fletcher doesn't strike out. Trout doesn't strike out. Pujols doesn't strike out. But the only really good hitters are Trout, Rendon, and then Upton has some power. And then on the other side, the Mariners, not a great team by any stretch. Kyle Lewis does have some power batting third that you could use as a leverage play. I did kind of start to get on Justice Sheffield right before the show, though. And obviously I'll like him more if Rendon sits. But he's someone who's just getting basically no ownership. The price tag isn't super appealing, but it's not terrible either. Last year in 8 games with the Mariners, 7 starts, he struck out 22% of hitters. He's stretched out, which is obviously appealing. It's a pretty decent spot to be pitching in weather and park-wise. I think that he has just more natural talent than most pitchers on this slate. So if he's not getting any ownership, I do think that's a spot where I like pivoting in tournaments.
Yeah, definitely. I think he has upside as well. So maybe a good way to mix up your lineups if everyone is kind of going a certain place. The last game of the night, we got San Diego at San Francisco. Zach Davies versus Samardzija. I mean, Samardzija, this has been confusing me to no end, where it's like he was supposed to start and then he was like, did he even pitch in that game? Or
No, he didn't pitch. The Dodgers apparently were kind of like pissed off with how the Giants handled the pitching that series. And Gabe Kapler for the Giants basically said that he thinks there's an edge to not making the decision on starting pitching until close to game time, because you can kind of see how everyone's feeling and stuff. I don't know. It kind of sounded like something that you would do with like a 12-year-old baseball team, but whatever. It gets us Samardzija today, finally, in a good pitcher's park. It's still Jeff Samardzija. It's not like it's a great pitcher, but he is cheap.
Man, that's brutal. So like Samardzija, like obviously you could pivot to a different player if he's not starting. But the matchup is pretty decent. So we got this game in San Francisco where the cold weather obviously limits production. San Diego, though, they're up and coming team, so they have a team total of 5. That's pretty good. They strike out about average, so I think San Diego may be a stack you can go to today, despite the park being a disadvantage. They actually are rating really well in my contrarian stacks. So how do you feel about the Padres?
I'm not really getting there. I can see, obviously they're projected to be a little underowned, and they do have a ton of talent. One thing, so we don't have the lineup yet. We don't know if Eric Hosmer will be in it. Kind of not a slate dependent thing, but keep an eye on Eric Hosmer. He's someone that throughout his career has hit the ball really hard, but he's always hit a ton of ground balls. He acknowledged in the spring that he needed to stop hitting ground balls. And so far, obviously very early in the season, he's actually been hitting the ball in the air, which is like the only thing that has ever stopped him from being an above average hitter. So at least keep an eye on kind of what he's doing, because he's someone that in this shortened season could really be going under projected depending on if he changed things.
Nice. So Hosmer could be a guy to look at here. I think that the Padres are kind of interesting, especially given that we have the chalk today. It seems to be more on the bats than anything. So like just going to a good team, but not a great one like the Padres seems like it could pay off pretty big. The Giants, on the other hand, not a team with a ton of talent. Pretty below average lineup, and also they have a bad park for batting. So I think they're probably one of my weaker stacks of the day, the weakest in my top stacks. Any love for the Giants?
No, I have a little bit of love for Zach Davies, just because the Giants aren't good and mostly because of the park. But I think that between the two, he's kind of like Justice Sheffield. You don't know what you're getting, but you know that the upside could be a lot higher. Zach Davies, you know exactly what you're getting, and it's very not exciting. But at the same time, kind of not exciting, and pitching in a good park is enough to make me interested on this slate.
Nice. Yeah, so Davies could be someone to look at here. Honestly, like I don't know if he has the strikeouts that really get me interested. But the matchup certainly couldn't be any better. So definitely take a look at that. All right, guys, first of all, thanks everyone for watching. And a couple of reminders, SuperDraft locks at 7:30. So you'll have an extra 30 minutes to get on there. We have some good promos. FanDuel is 6:40 and DraftKings is 7:05. So a little bit staggered time. I always recommend playing on as many sites as you can. Well, Adam, thank you for all the analysis here. And we got a great show coming up after this with Spags and Jake. So make sure to tune into Live Before Lock right after this.
We're live. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm an idiot. Welcome, everybody, to Live Before Lock here for Awesemo.com. I'm told the only show like it in the entire DFS industry, and that's why we bring out the big guns every single night. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by a man who I have not been graced by the company of in far too long. You may know him as Jake Hari. You may know him as the baseball savant. He's here with me right now, Jake Hari. How are you doing, Jake?
Good, man. It's good to talk to you. Finally. It feels like forever.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's baseball season. We've been waiting for it. There's been so much going on across baseball. Already chaos, Jake, but as long as I have you here for it, I mean, tell the people where you got the nickname Baseball Savant.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago now. I don't actually remember how it started, but I just know it had something to do with the site Baseball Savant. And I must have been referencing it a bunch, or maybe maybe not even a bunch, maybe just on our first show. And you called me the Baseball Savant, and it's just stuck. And here we are 2 years later, still being called the Baseball Savant. So it's pretty cool.
It's a reflection of your genius at baseball, as well as Jake's dedication every single day to bring you guys the best possible MLB content. And of course, it wouldn't be Awesemo if we didn't offer you the best MLB content and all the best content across all the sports. Of course, going to talk a lot about baseball here, but NBA is coming back up. PGA's got a big tournament this week as well. And you can get access to all of that data if you use the promo code RESTART at awesemo.com/join. That'll give you half off your first month of an Awesemo Plus monthly package for all of our sports. And Jake, I know, has played a lot of esports over this time period. I've been playing MMA. That's my favorite by far. PGA, NASCAR, though, also a lot of fun. And again, NBA coming back. So you want that data in your life. Get it tomorrow. Get it today. Eminently. It's going away soon at awesemo.com/join. Use that promo code RESTART. And one more plug for our friends at SuperDraft, who, of course, help us put on this show and many other shows on this YouTube channel every single day. So check out the future of daily fantasy sports because it has arrived. You go to superdraft.io or download SuperDraft in the App Store and say hello to their exclusive game mode multiplier, where you say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to pure lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want and build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities let you experience daily fantasy sports the way that you want. So go to superdraft.io, where they offer contests for NBA, MLB, PGA, NASCAR, MMA, everything you want. You can find on SuperDraft. Less rake as well. Lots of opportunities for overlay. So go to superdraft.io. Use the promo code AWESEMO10, AWESEMO10, and get $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more. And if you deposit more than $100, you get $20 free. So take advantage of that promo code AWESEMO10 at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store, because at SuperDraft, there are no limits. More winning. There we go. Jake, let's talk baseball. Yesterday's slate, we saw a man get designated for assignment after being the highest priced pitcher on the slate industry-wide. What awaits us today in the world of pitchers, Jake? Because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I heard some of the deeper dive talk. Alex was on the nose yesterday with Tyler Glasnow being a core part of things, despite some limited innings expectations for him. Josh James, I think we all maybe bit that bullet a little too hard. But where are you seeing as the number one pitcher on today's slate, Jake? Because there is one guy who's very highly owned on the Angels that I don't know that I'm buying into, but I'll probably have too much of as well.
Yeah, I'm not buying into Sandoval that much, just based on where his ownership is at. Like, to me, there's probably like 7 or 8 guys that you could argue for as the top play when you factor in the ownership projections. So, like I've been looking at the top pitchers tool today, trying to figure out a way to work this into my sheet here. And I think I've figured out a good way to do it, just trying to do it the same way as I do identifying the top stacks and under-owned stacks and over-owned stacks. There's definitely some over-owned pitchers, and it looks like, at least on DraftKings, Sandoval is definitely one of them. I think he's still the most over-owned pitcher on the slate when you look at that top pitchers tool. So he's someone I'm going to try to steer clear of. It's not really like I have a good pivot. I think there's one pitcher on the slate that is better than all these other guys by a pretty good margin, that being Walker Buehler, but the matchup just stinks against Houston. That being said, he's pretty low owned, and so he's a guy I've got my eye on. What do you think about Buehler here? Can you go against the Astros?
So, I mean, the concern is sort of the same one that we just saw yesterday with Glasnow, and Glasnow did come through in a big way. He's also, got I would say, slightly filthier strikeout stuff. I think you can probably split hairs and argue that one than Buehler does. Buehler, a great, deep inning pitcher, pitched just under 6 innings per game last year. Did a good job keeping the damage down with just that one whip for him. But I'm going to have some Buehler. I don't mind it. I do think that pivoting from Sandoval is going to be the move, like you were saying. And I think the question is really, well, A, how much Sandoval to have, because we haven't projected ownership-wise, at least the last run that I put into my sheet, at 40% on DraftKings. And it definitely feels like too much. And I'll tell you, Jake, here's a guy who I have as a pivot at the price point, and we can already get ugly right away. Jeff Samardzija. I think people may, the Padres are a team with a ton of power. They also are historically a team with a good amount of strikeouts. They have 6 guys in today's lineup, or at least a projected lineup, that are over league average in strikeouts. And Samardzija, not a big strikeout pitcher, but I feel like I've been hanging in there for the most part in these slates, where even if I miss out on these guys, so somebody you can stay in there, eat some innings up in a pitching friendly park. I think that's what Samardzija can provide today. So give me your thoughts, Jake. If you had to choose between Chalk Sandoval or mediocre Shark, which one would you want to go with?
The Padres really scare me. Like, it's a good park. Everybody knows that in San Francisco. But like a 5 implied total going up against Samardzija, that just kind of tells you what Vegas thinks of him. He's getting a little bit of ownership, nothing outrageous. Like, as long as you're not in that 30-40% today, when basically all these guys are the same, I'm fine, and I'm fine with it. I think I like the Padres side a little bit better. They're creeping up there as one of my top stacks here for my exposures. But like, there's something to be said about, okay, are we going to pay up for bad pitchers or like bad plays, or do we just take the extra salary and play Trout and Yelich and all of these like sluggers that you could get in your lineup as one-offs or two-mans? So that would be the case for Samardzija. There's not anything I see with him that suggests he's going to have a resurgence or anything like that. Maybe he gets a favorable lineup when the Padres come out with theirs. They're actually the only lineup we're missing right now. So that's pretty cool. So maybe once we see the lineup, if one of these usuals is out, in that category for me.
So we'll keep going through it. And of course, we talk about a lot of pitchers on the show. We don't try to advocate for everybody, but a lot of DFS is just kind of going through that thought exercise and trying to figure out the different ways you can go, especially with a lot of big tournaments right now across the industry, including FanDuel, which I guess we should touch on really fast, because I think that's locking like eminently, right?
It is 6:40 Eastern, I want to say. So it's 2 extra games.
So are you playing on FanDuel tonight? Did you prep these games?
Yep.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean, it's not going to matter for pitching that much, but I don't know. Any specific guy you want to talk about?
No, I'm just kind of curious. I want to make sure we give the people a little bit here. And for me, I did prep DK first and foremost with some SuperDraft thrown in, because we got to love our boys over at SuperDraft. But yeah, I just wanted to see if there's anything, I guess, you feel particularly noteworthy to bring up about the Cubs-Reds game or the Braves-Rays game. I know the Braves-Rays, the Deeper Dive guys talked about it some length. Yanni Chirinos getting the same. We don't know how long he's going to throw. It might be 1 inning. It might be 4. Approached that glass now god yesterday. I don't see a ton I would love. I think maybe the bats in the Cubs-Reds game would be a little more appealing to me than any of the pitching here. But is there anything, Jake, that jumped out to you as being particularly worthwhile for FanDuel players?
Not really. I mean, some of these Reds, especially like the guys I want to play, like Suarez, Castellanos, they're getting some popularity on FanDuel. So that's kind of taking them off my board a little bit. And then I thought I would get a bunch of Cubs, but I barely have any of the Cubs bats. So just going a different direction on FanDuel in my 150. I'm just playing the really like low stakes stuff and just fired 150. But I'm actually not getting to much of the bats in that game. It's not like I'm getting to a lot of the pitchers either, but let me look and see. Yeah, I only got to a couple shares of Tyler Mahle. So I'm below the field on him. Looking over at this other game. No, let's see. Oh, I did get to 5% Yanni Chirinos. I probably won't even recrunch because I think I've got all the correct players in. We just got an ownership update just now as I'm talking. But yeah, low-ish total for the Braves. I mean, tough park in Tampa. So not really a stack I'm targeting all that often. I wouldn't say I'm like cutting these games off the slate. I do have some one-offs and some two-mans for the Cubs and the Red side. But I'm pretty much below the field on everything in these first 2 games that lock on FanDuel. And 28 minutes.
So there you go. So there's some FanDuel for you. Make sure you're paying attention to that lock time coming up. As Jake mentioned, just 28 minutes to that. And the ownership on FanDuel also looking a little bit different than DraftKings. Going to be a lot of Pete Alonso, it looks like, at a discounted price on FanDuel. So keep that in mind. If you want the rest of the ownership projections and all those FanDuel tools, go to awesemo.com/join. Use that promo code RESTART for half off your first month on all of our sports. And that includes baseball for FanDuel. And there's these weird timings. How do you feel about the weird timings, by the way? Because it's been throwing me for a loop. With yesterday, we did a show that ended 20 minutes early for no particular reason. Today, it's like FanDuel starts at one time. Like, does it kind of throw you for a loop like it does me? This doesn't matter to anybody besides us.
No, it does for sure. Like I think I was telling people in chat yesterday, I was like, oh, FanDuel locks in 15 minutes. I was, going to run my stuff, see what I get, run it a couple more times. But I didn't really have time. Like with these, so like we see these, we've been seeing these like early starts and like FanDuel and DK being out of sync with each other for, I think, like 4 years. I can't remember what the reasoning was, but like Cleveland would start a bunch of their home games early in the season. And then at some point they would stop. I don't know. Yeah, it does mess me up if you can't tell. I still don't know who's on which slate, or I've got to like remind myself and really, really think hard about which games. Because I'm like, all right, on DraftKings, I didn't get any Cubs. Well, that's because they're not on the slate. But I'm thinking of all the I see this high ownerships for FanDuel. So yeah, I'll get used to it. But it always takes me a couple weeks at least to like figure out who's on which team. There's some funky slates at the beginning of the MLB season. I'm still in NHL mode. That comes back on Saturday. But yeah, it's just everything's all over the place, and the sites can't just like combine it together. So
yeah,
they
can't just be on the same
page.
If you're new to MLB DFS, it is actually always like this for MLB. It's not changed too much, but NBA probably going to see some similar stuff. And also make sure you're staying tuned on the channel after we finish. It's going to be Josh Loffy and Greg Ehrenberg, one of our new, I butchered that name. Greg Ehrenberg, a guy who's I've done a lot of shows with on DK Live when I used to do those streams. And he's a great guy, going to be one of our new NBA analysts, doing a lot of shows. You've probably seen him on some stuff so far. And of course, Josh and Loffy, two of the greats, and two of Jake and my personal favorite people at our company. I'm sure I won't speak for Jake, but it's going to be a great show talking about the restart, talking about all the good stuff. And I'm just pretending now that Jake didn't like them and then just didn't chime in and support. But yeah, check out that show right after hours. Stay tuned to the channel. And of course, make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell so you know whenever we have content coming up, because there is going to be, Lord, oh Lord, there is going to be a lot of content coming up.
So much.
So much. Also, didn't Alex win on $100,000 on FanDuel yesterday? I think I saw amidst various Twitter beefs.
He did not win $100,000. He won both $100,000 on FanDuel plus a $25,000 just a little sweetener after the $200,000. And I couldn't check. I think FC Pro is having some issues loading the main slate on DK, so I haven't checked. But saw a bunch of Awesemo logos at one point in some. I think it was like the $20 3 max. Myself, Rinpack, 1800 Eddie, 1-800 Eddie. I always say that wrong. And then
1800s Eddie. He's from a simpler time that was way more racist.
1800s. Yeah. Pioneer of DFS. He's been around for a couple hundred years. No. But yeah, we were like all in the top 10. So I'm assuming, if you used the tools on the site last night and you multi-entered, you probably had a couple of good lineups. And a bunch of us did. How'd you do?
Your Rinpack took down $50,000 on FanDuel too.
Yeah, you don't even need to mention it. It's just like when Alex wins $100K. Rinpack's winning everything.
He's telling me how a lifetime the last month or so. I feel like he's been.
And he binked $100K in NBA earlier in the season. He was telling me how bad PGA is going. He didn't talk to me for a week and then takes down $100K. So I'm like, all right, man, I got to start putting you in my players to study little notes here.
Yeah, Rinpack, a monster, and he'll be doing some NBA streams for us coming up as well. So a little bit of an exciting addition there. Rinpack, Ryan, one of my favorite guys as well behind the scenes. I'm just giving everybody love today. I love everybody, but all the people I mentioned today specifically. And make sure to follow all that content coming up. Let's keep talking through the rest of this pitching slate, Jake. We'll talk some more hitters in the back half. We'll also, of course, do home run picks, which, Jake, have not been going well for us so far, as I didn't update yesterday's sheet. Also, not doing well for us in terms of managing them because I'm the only one putting them in, and I'm also not tracking them adequately. So it's been a real comedy of errors for the home run game so far. But our boy, El Negro Loco, who's the news god, who's doing our live blog for MLB, will be doing a ton of news-related content for us, keeping you updated on all the injuries and all that. Did get Whit Merrifield yesterday, so the man came through. Somebody came through for us. Let's talk about some more pitching, Jake, because we got to cover every last corner. The Derek Hollins, Josh Lindblom, a guy who I guess came from the Korean League and signed a deal, I think, in December is what I was reading today. And apparently they have some decent hopes for Rony Garcia, the opener for Detroit, a guy who a very appropriate name for 2020, perhaps not one that reminds us of the best things in MLB. David Peterson. Jake, you're usually pretty good at knowing these guys who people don't probably have any sample size at all. I know I don't have any data on them on my usual sheet. So do any of these guys seem remotely worthwhile? Matt Hall, another guy I know Awesemo talked about, not great numbers and a limited sample size for him as the Red Sox pitcher tonight, but maybe somebody you could play at cheap. Jake, any of these guys jump out to you as being worth even any exposure?
I mean, yes, they're worth exposure because they all are terrible. But there's higher owned guys that are terrible. And so I'm just going to try to go to the lesser owned of these guys. I don't think Framber Valdez is bad, but he's a guy I'm getting to around 20%, which scares me because he's going up against the Dodgers. No one likes that match, whether you're righty, lefty. Unless you're an elite strikeout pitcher, you can't really make a case outside of ownership. But anyways, I have some Valdez. The one cheap guy I just kind of holding my breath for is Hall, 6 implied total going against him. You wouldn't expect him to get a bunch of strikeouts here. Looks like a pretty strong lineup for the Mets. And then, back to the 6 total, super hot in Boston, a little bit of wind blowing out. You're basically just hoping, from a lot of these guys, I would say 8 of the guys I'm playing, I'm just hoping they get to double digits, or a couple of them break free, get to 15, 18 DK points. And then you're going to win it with your stacks tonight, as you are most nights in MLB DFS. So I'm just focusing more on the stacks and just trying to not get not overexpose myself on any of these pitchers. And I keep talking about the top pitcher tool. I've dug in into it a little bit more today. I mentioned Buehler. He looks like one of the more under-owned pitchers on the slate relative to his chances of being a top 2 pitcher. And then Hall also grades out pretty favorably. So just for an example, I'll give the real numbers here. If you want to sign up, feel free to use the promo code RESTART. Like Chris said, it's going away really soon. But Hall has a almost 30% chance of being a top 2 value, top 2 pitcher percentage, just 10%. But that's not even bottom 5 on the slate, and then 0.8% ownership. So it's kind of, all these guys are Hail Mary plays, but getting the sub 5K guy with a decent chance to be a really, really good value on the slate. If you can get into that 15 point range, you're going to be sitting pretty with the rest of your lineups.
So let's go to Merrill Kelly, because I'm actually curious your thoughts about him, because, another 10K pitcher. And it's actually very funny to think in retrospect about poor Adam, who was rooting for, who's the dude on Cincinnati who he was rooting for to hit the 10K barrier for a while?
Sonny Gray.
Yes. So he was rooting for him for so long to get there. Actually, deservedly so. Great strikeout rate, all of that. And then we open this year, and it's Fultonevich and Merrill Kelly hitting 10K instantly. I don't get it with Merrill Kelly. He does throw pretty deep into games. He does fit some of that criteria for me, where if the game just doesn't blow up, it might not be bad for him if he just can stay in for the 5 to 6 innings he usually does throw for. And Texas, we've talked about it. We were Alex and I were unsure last week about how Texas would work with the Globe Life roof that's on now. I thought it might be wise to at least fade Texas in the early onset because of the just not being as hot inside. It's air conditioned. I think they clocked it at being about 70 degrees in the stadium with the roof closed over the weekend. And it's been the case where pitchers have been looking a little better in Texas than one would expect. And I think you still have some of that vestigial ownership left over for the Rangers. I don't mind going to Merrill Kelly, and I do think Merrill Kelly and the very underpriced Royals, who went off yesterday, and it feels like a day late to play them. Like that's kind of a pairing if you go Buehler Kelly with that I don't hate, and I think at least has some potential to not completely ruin you. So tell me your thoughts here. Merrill Kelly, do you see him being a very playable option? Are you willing to go above the 19% we have projected for him on DraftKings, and also would you play him with Buehler, or would you be inclined just to play him in lieu of Buehler?
I think we just updated. Let's see. Did he go down in the ownership projections?
I put in the most recent one, so I think he went down a little, yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm seeing 26%, which I have
down to 19, I think. I rounded up 19.
Okay, cool. Let me put that in. And then, yeah, I mean, he's playable. Like the Rangers strike out a ton. You've got a K machine, also home run machine in Gallo. If you can just keep the ball in the yard, and it's going to be a little bit easier to do that in Texas with the roof closed here. Wait, is it confirmed that it's going to be closed here?
I saw that somewhere. They don't have the Chase Field thing where you go on a website and you can see it easily. So I think I saw that it was going to be closed again, but if anybody has confirmation on that, either way, if I'm wrong, let me know.
Yeah.
But
I'm assuming it's closed just because of the modest implied totals here. And it's not like you've got two aces on the mound, Merrill Kelly and Gibson. If I'm wrong, feel free to let me know in chat. I'll be wrong a ton of times throughout the season, as I am every year. But you just got a bunch of guys that strike out against righties, average to above average to way above average in Gallo's case. I think you could strike out Frazier from the right side. It's not like Kelly's great, but maybe he can get you a K per inning in 5 or 6 innings. He shouldn't be priced at 10K really ever. So it is a little bit of an overprice. But it looks like he's being owned at a pretty fair rate when you look at the rest of these pitchers on the slate. So he's fine. I don't see myself making a major stand on him. He's probably going to be in that 15 to 25% range for me by the time we get done.
Yeah, and Jake mentioned again the top pitchers tool. You should be checking that out as part of your process. And if you don't have that membership, awesemo.com/join with the promo code RESTART gets you half off your first month on all of our sports. So you can also get NBA, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, everything else that's going on in the sports world, esports. All of that will be available to you if you use that promo code RESTART at awesemo.com/join. Kelly is just has a slightly higher chance of being a top two pitcher compared to his ownership. So he's safe to play, it looks like right now, ownership-wise, but doesn't have the leverage that Jake mentioned earlier, a guy like Walker Buehler, who people seem to be moving a bit more away from because of that innings limitation, which it's weird. Have you noticed this? And this is totally anecdotal. Please don't quote me on the data. But have you felt like the pitchers are kind of throwing more gas early and just willing to get out of a game earlier because of the season? Because it's, again, totally anecdotal, but Glasnow yesterday was one example. I feel like there have been a few of these, Scherzer too, just like really hitting the strikeouts heavier than I don't know. I honestly, this is just me talking out my ass, but does that strike you as being something that could be a little different this year? Because it's much shorter. It's a third of the length of the season.
Yeah, I think like they have to get it revved up quicker. So maybe we see more injuries. We've already seen a number of guys, Verlander, Miles Michaelis. I know he just right before the show, he's out for the season with the forearm. So like the forearm elbow issues, maybe that'll be more prevalent. But yeah, I'm guessing like you can't waste games. Every game costs basically 2.8 times as much as it would in a normal season. It's 2.7 or 2.8. I can't remember. But anyways, like you can't just throw away 3-4 games at a time because you're just going to find yourself out of the playoffs, and it's going to be really difficult to make up with a limited amount of games in a sport that has such high variance. So yeah, I think the mindset for a lot of these guys will be just let's fire it up quick and try to get in mid-season form as quickly as possible. But at the same time, like, yeah, that might result in some more injuries here and there. So
yeah, just interesting to keep an eye on. I think, again, nothing data-wise that I've seen that supports that in a meaningful way, but anecdotally, just kind of reminds me of MMA, where there were people, a lot of smarter people with MMA we're talking about in UFC, guys coming out looking for that knockout earlier because they just knew they didn't have the cardio to last. Yeah. And I think maybe there could be the case of some of the pitchers here really throwing some of their best stuff earlier rather than trying to pace themselves and keep it going. Let's close the loop on pitching here, Jake. A couple guys we haven't talked about who I've seen people talk about in chat. And Colorado, Oakland, another game at a park that doesn't allow a ton of power. Oakland's park generally not going to give up a lot. Senzatella getting that park upgrade. Mangden also pretty mediocre, pretty decently priced. I guess it can be sort of a price point pivot to guys like Sandoval and of course my beloved Jeff Samardzija, the guy who I'm going to die by today with a 17% K rate. But Mangden, Senzatella, Jake, any of these guys seem worthwhile to you? I know you said you're spreading it out, but just want to give you, if there's any Jake cosign you want to give on these guys, now's the time.
Yeah, I don't think Mangden's bad. I don't think he's a bad pitcher. Number one, I think he's an okay ownership play. In fact, I haven't looked at him specifically on this tool, but I'm assuming he's not over-owned or anything like that. Let's see. There he is. He's a little bit under-owned, closer to fairly owned. Okay chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Okay chance of being a value, not owned at a crazy high rate. He could probably rack up a few strikeouts against Colorado, pitcher-friendly park, cool weather in Oakland. I think Adam mentioned that on the show as well. Minus 160-ish favorite. If you just look at Vegas and you look at Mangden's price compared to other guys and then his ownership, it looks pretty solid for him. So I'm more on him than Senzatella at 6,600. I'm a little bit more worried about the Oakland bats than I am for these Colorado bats outside of Coors.
Yeah, a lot of power in that Oakland lineup, which can blow things up, but definitely, I could see if you're playing 150, I do tend to limit my lineups a little bit more to the 20 max range with these shows that we're doing live. But I think in a 150, I could see getting a little more Senzatella. And Mangden, I agree. I think just a guy who really doesn't give up a ton of dangerous power, can go deep into games, has a nice 1.2 whip over the last year. That's enough to get you through today on this slate, especially if a guy like Sandoval blows up, which it does seem likely. Guys, help us out. Hit that like button, please. We're heading into the home run picks time of the show, the most anxiety-inducing part of the show for us, but also great fun. So make sure you're applying, giving us your picks in the chat. And also, I got to give some shout-outs. Guys like T. McBee. I gave the shout-out to El Negro Loco before. T. McBee, a guy who's doing a lot of baseball content for us. You can hear him on the Early Bird podcast a lot of days alongside your old pal EMAC. And apparently his overnight article's been doing well with the home run picks too. So never one who wants to deprive credit. So shout out to some other guys behind the scenes, not doing this live before lock show, doing great work, giving out picks. And speaking of that, Jake, now it's time for us to give our bad picks. And the Dong game, the shortest version of the Dong game means we are going to have a lot of egg on our face more days than not. Yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly, I know Michael Brantley had another nice day, but didn't get a home run for me. Thanks, Michael Brantley. I didn't see Suarez get a home run unless I'm missing something. So
I don't think he did.
Yeah. So we're boned. I don't think anybody got one besides El Negro Loco yesterday and Terry. Terry actually got Pete Alonso correct as well. So those guys are correct. If they drop their picks in, we'll let you guys know. But Jake, the floor is yours. Who would be your home run pick for the day?
Let me make sure in this last run that I'm still getting a bunch of this guy. I think right now my highest exposed hitter, I will take, let's make sure he's in the lineup. Fernando Tatis, leading off $4,600 on DK. Right now, my highest owned guy. But I wouldn't be mad if you went for someone on the Minnesota Twins because they look pretty good to me too.
The Minnesota Jakes, of course, a perennial power team. I feel like Carlos Martinez, a guy I don't want to go against too much. Looking at his numbers, I mean, the isolated power he's given up under a 0.10 for last year, both lefties and righties. That's not where I'm going, even though the Twins can hit one out against anybody. I think I'm going to go, man. I have a good amount of this team, and I like this guy, but not enough. Yeah, I'm going to go Ryan Braun. I don't know. I don't love it, but Derek Holland, I feel like righty power has always been a struggle for him, giving up a 241 ISO to righties over the last season and change. So Ryan Braun, all power, all righty. That's my dude.
I like it. Anytime you can get Braun against a lefty, I know he hasn't been the same guy in previous years. Like he legitimately for 10, 12-year stretch was one of the best players against lefties in all of the league. And I think he's had a couple down years, but down years for him, he's still a solid hitter. He's still a solid hitter against lefties, and Derek Holland, nothing to write home about here.
And there we go. Negro Loco's pick is in. He's going back to Kansas City, going to Ryan O'Hearn, a team that I want to talk about because I'm curious to hear some Jake takes on that one. But there's our boy El Negro Loco. Check out his live blog on Awesemo.com. He does a great job staying on top of the news, so you don't have to. But Ryan O'Hearn is his pick. Let's see, did EMAC get a pick in? T. McBee is going for Keston Hiura. So that is a slap right in my face for the Brewers. So T. McBee. So if you want to follow the good picks, go to Keston Hiura and Ryan O'Hearn. And if you want to play along with Jake and me, go to Ryan Braun and Fernando.
Wait, who took Goto Hearn? Lockie's going to be livid. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. That's the GOAT. I mean, the guy that never does anything, but he just hit a lot of homers one year once and now sucks.
I do keep the 2020 stats, even though they're kind of worthless because I just want to see if anybody's doing well. O'Hearn's actually starting the year pretty well. He hasn't hit a home run yet, but he's got a 500 batting average. There was a tweet today that I think it was it John Heyman, one of the guys, I think it was Heyman, who posted Magnus Sierra or whatever from the Marlins is out, and he was like, he's leading the NL with a 750 OVP, 1,000 slugging. Like, yeah, he had a good one game.
He's got 7 at bats on the season, and
yeah, small sample size
loss.
Death, but. There we go. Spags need to go back to his old setup. I need to make sure the dog is okay. Unfortunately, the dogs are outside now hanging out. They get to hang out with my girlfriend, though. I'm sure they'll make cameos at some point, but they can't just wander around back here on a wall. Maybe if I had my dog hung up on the wall, I think we would have a lot more issues than today's slate. Let's keep going through the hitting side of the equation. Of course, guys, hit that like button. It really does help us out a bunch, and we appreciate it very much, but it also helps us get seen by more people, which is important as the only live stream that goes on before any slate of sports on any given day. And also make sure you're going to awesemo.com/join to take advantage of that promo code restart. The top stacks tool is a godsend every day, especially if you're low on time to plan. You can find out where your leverage is right away without digging through the hours of research that guys like Jake and I do, as well as Awesemo, of course, waking up early, making sure things run right. So use that top stacks tool and get all of it at awesemo.com/join with the promo code restart. All right, the Royals, Jake, yesterday they went nuts. They went absolutely nuts. Were the must-have, the nut stack, as you would say. I know that's one of your go-tos. And they were completely perfect. Today they're going to be owned out completely to insane levels on all the sites. I'm going to be there a little. I don't want to be there with the field. I think that's not the right move with our cheap Royals team, but they are still incredibly cheap across the board. The aforementioned Ryan O'Hearn at 2,200, Mikael Franco, who just hit 2 homers yesterday, also down at 2,200. I don't expect that to happen again, but I also don't think the Detroit bullpen is going to be much better with Ronny Garcia as the opener. I don't see any reason why would be too concerned here. So do you go back to the Royals today, Jake, or do you just run away because they had that success yesterday?
So I'm looking through my exposures here. I limited my stacks for the Royals and a couple other teams because I'm going to get dominated out of the Royals, the few Royals stacks that I do probably, because they're just going to be so popular. They're such good value. But as we talk about, and Alex has kind of drilled into my head in these high variance sports, value is just pretty overrated. It just gets owned so much out the ass, some might say. When it's a really good spot. And so, it is a good spot. If you wanted to poke some holes, the opener isn't always the most appealing thing when you're kind of breaking ties for me. But you look at some of these individual plays and specifically the top 3 guys on DK, and you probably have to throw in Salvador Perez at 2,800. These prices are just broken. So I'm not sure who they were supposed to go up against, but they're priced like they're going up against a good pitcher and not a 5.5 implied total in Detroit here. So with that being said, I will have Royals in my exposures, but a lot of it's going to be Merrifield, Mondesi, Soler, one-offs, 2-mans, and then in the few stacks I do get to, just trying to pair them with a team that is not going to be easily paired with the Royals. So whether that means just punting one of my pitcher spots with a guy like Hall or someone like that, and doing Royals and I don't know, someone off the board. I can't even give an example, but I'm looking through my lineups. I've got some Royals Twins stacks, but they're 5-2-1s instead of 5-3s. I've got Royals Padres, I think maybe is a nice pairing. Padres aren't a team that a lot of people look to be on right now. So just trying to be smart with the few Royal stacks that I do get to. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely put in one lineup before we came on of Royals, Brewers, and was just this is going to be incredibly owned. But it felt right to get one little taste of it in. But I agree. I mean, this top 4 for the Royals is so highly owned. And something too, where I guess this is a question worth asking you, Jake, but I wouldn't mind getting a one-off of guys like O'Hearn or Franco or even Oscar Hernandez or Phillips, because they are so cheap, and that does give you a little bit of a different construction, because those guys aren't going to be owned parts of the Royals, but that top four is so highly owned. And a guy like Mondesi, I don't think he's a great steals guy. I think he's got some potential, but should he be 22% owned on any slate? Probably not. So I agree, like trying to get a little different and not ride the full 5-man. Definitely not a 5-man stacked with the Brewers, I think would be probably not a good approach.
Yeah, so you're going to want one or two low-owned parts if you love the Royals today and you want to have 50% Royal stacks, or go all in, or you're making one lineup. Just try to differentiate yourself. And if you're hand building in the lineup with the Royals, like you throw in 5 Royals and it fits perfectly, and it's a large field tournament, maybe you want to go elsewhere and make a 2v2 or something like that, just to try to not dupe, because like baseball isn't a big dupe sport. It's not something you have to worry about all the time, but there are scenarios when you get this crazy good value team that you might be more prone to dupe. So I'm just looking to avoid those in any DFS sport, really.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And here's a question. We got 2 minutes left before FanDuel locks, so we'll make sure to hit this one real fast. Jake, if you were playing a single entry on FanDuel, which pitcher do you think you'd want to go with for that type of environment?
I like Kelly. I think he's my highest exposed pitcher on FanDuel. So I actually have probably way too much of Merrill Kelly right now. I like the pitcher on the other side too, Gibson. Like, he's just got okay stuff. But I did hear what Alex said about the Arizona lineup, and it's actually not as easy as maybe what it was at some points last season. So he scared me off a little bit, but those are my highest 2 guys over on FanDuel.
Yeah, Kelly, definitely a much better price point for him on FanDuel. We talked about the markup on Merrill Kelly. On FanDuel, he's just 7,800, so he does seem like a pretty good place to start, and does have the best mix of fantasy point projection and value from Awesemo, it looks like, though. As Jake mentioned, some of these guys not too far behind, including Kyle Gibson, Sandoval as well, also very cheap on there, but maybe arguably more ill-advised because of the lack of pitching options. Let's keep talking through the stacks, Jake. Who's your top stack of the day so far? I'm going to assume it's not the Royals based on what we just talked about. So who's your top owned one, it looks like?
Yeah, I like I really like 2 teams. So I guess if I had to choose just one, because of the ownership, it would probably be San Diego against the over-owned Jeff Samardzija, it's looking like. Just a lot of power up and down this lineup. They came out with the normal guys. Love Tatis, love Machado. Pham, a guy who's really good for DFS, home run and steal upside. Hosmer, Adam mentioned he changes his swing, or he's looking to hit more fly balls. And it's not probably going to matter much in this park. But I think the top 5 looks really, really good for San Diego. Plus, you get a little bit of leverage off the field, stacking against Jeff Samardzija, who has been quite tilting over the years, one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's why I'm Team Jeff Samardzija today, baby. That's the reason why. I'm just remembering the other side of the outcome. I mean, look, San Francisco, not the friendliest time. The temperature there today is 58 because San Francisco's the silliest city when it comes to their weather and how summer works and all of that. So I still would not go to the Padres, but I get it. They have a lot of power guys, and I'm sure the lineup will be good, so whatever. The Team Jeff Samardzija. Actually, the Padres lineup did come out, so we officially got it. Yeah, I think there might have been one change that we didn't have, so Alex swapped that out. I think they're updated though now in our projections and rankings pages. Yeah, I should just like pull the full tap move and completely couch it and be like, yeah, well, now the lineup's a little different. I don't know. I don't feel as good about Samardzija, but yeah, but have no fear. I'm dying on the Samardzija vine tonight because that just seems like the right thing to do. You know, it's that time of year. It's shark season. I think it's almost Shark Week. I feel like almost. Maybe.
Is it? Oh, that's usually in August, dude. I feel like it's still April because baseball just started, and then now it's gonna mess me up with basketball back on Thursday. I'm gonna be like, man, October and September, and the rest of these sports are gonna be really fun if they can figure this out. Which it's not looking great for baseball, but we had baseball yesterday, and so maybe we'll have it for the next few months too.
Yeah, baseball's going to get there by sheer force of will, if nothing else, it seems. But
That's what
they can't afford not to, it looks like. And also, yeah, still 6 guys in the, just to mention a point that I talked about earlier before we knew the final lineup, still 6 guys above league average in strikeout rate for the Padres in the lineup they have now. So that's what I'm banking on tonight for old Shark, but we'll find out. Other stacks that I guess I'll give you my stack that I'm intrigued by, Jake. And I guess actually this game technically has one of my top stacks too. This Seattle Angels game I'm intrigued by. I think with Sandoval's ownership, just going against him with the stack does seem logical. And we did, just see Seattle have a nice run going against Justin James. So maybe there's a chance there. But, the Angels Park last year played a little better for home runs, played a little better for power. Angels also getting Anthony Rendon in the lineup tonight, which I think is going to give them a boost. So the Angels are a stack I like just purely on their own ability. And, the guys that they have in there, we don't need to talk about Mike Trout. You don't need to talk about Shohei Ohtani. There are many other streams that can extol the virtues of guys like those. But Seattle, I think, is just interesting because I don't buy into Sandoval too much. He hasn't done a great job limiting power, giving up a 186 ISO overall. Only faced 170 batters within the last year, so it's not a perfect number, but that much ownership on a pitcher who I think is mediocre. I want to get a little exposure that way. I did get one full stack to Seattle. I did get a couple mini stacks to Seattle. So give me your thoughts on the 2 hitting sides in this game, Jake, with Seattle and the Angels.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not crazy about the Angels. I'm actually trying to limit the amount I get to them. They look to be a little bit overowned in the top stack tool. Still not highly owned or anything like that. So I don't think you need to avoid them if you like them. But not great value. I should say not great. It's okay value, and just a little bit too high for me to make one of my top stacks. On the other side, it would be Seattle. You mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seattle.
Yeah. Obviously, obvious leverage for those guys.
Yeah. So the leverage is really appealing. The problem is, you got to run a lot of lineups to get to Seattle stack. So I might just force some in and see if any of them grade out well from an ownership and leverage standpoint. You don't even need to go crazy to get on Seattle here. 0.4% ownership share right now in DK against 50% leverage. So if you're one of a couple hundred entries in a big tournament that has Seattle and they could put up 7-8 runs and you knock out Sandoval, that's massive. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for them if you can get to them, or if you're just a contrarian player by nature.
Yeah, and for the people out there who love the limited sample size stats, this Mariners team's actually been hitting really well to start the year, at least the guys they have in the lineup tonight. Evan White does have a home run, I think, and got on the board the other day. Kyle Lewis also hitting pretty well. Seager, Lopes. Is he Lopes or Lopez? I feel like it's got to be Lopez.
Tim Lopes, I believe it is.
All right, fair enough. I always respect the guys who, right in my face, defy the normal pronunciation I would expect. So Tim Lopes, Austin Nola too. I feel like all these guys I could see getting there, but I agree with the projections being what they are. I had to work to find a 3-man stack that I liked. A 5-man stack's definitely not going to occur naturally. But if you go that way and you really, go out of your way either to hand build it or just, up the randomness with Awesemo's projections, you can definitely get to a Seattle stack that would be gigantic leverage. And as Jake mentioned, nobody's owned on this team. So you could take any 5-man slice you want and you'll end up with somebody if it does go off.
Yeah, you're not playing Seattle, I don't think, here, even with 150, because they project well. In fact, they're probably going to project really poorly because Sandoval is going to be the highest scoring pitcher in some models, or top 3 or 4 in basically every. So whatever projections you're using, you're just hoping that baseball does baseball things, and a couple walks, all of a sudden there's a 3-run homer, and then you just flip the field. All the people who have Sandoval, I think, as weird as it is to say, it might even be a better play in a single entry, where a higher dollar single entry if you're that type of player, where everybody's just going to play Sandoval because he projects okay. You might see 60% ownership or even higher in some of these higher dollar tournaments for him, and Sandoval can't score points if the Seattle stack is going off, and vice versa. But it's a risk you should be willing to take.
Yeah, and Alex has pointed out a couple times, we're lucky to have him on a lot more streams this year, doing both live before lock as well as a deeper dive as he did today. But yeah, he mentioned the leverage against the pitcher is much more important than say getting the leverage of going against the hitting stack, because there's so many ways that people carve up their stacks, but a pitcher exactly where we're estimating half the field's going to be for Sandoval. And if you knock out that half the field, or that's just a mediocre half the field and portions of Seattle go off, there's a lot of ways you can get ahead in tournaments tonight. So definitely an option to consider. Let's keep going through, Jake. And I feel like this game, too, with the Dodgers and Houston seems like an important one. I know one of our new staffers, Leslie Mychik, is a big-time Dodgers fan and was praying that the coronavirus didn't knock out all of our MLB games. And huge Dodgers fan, wants to see some revenge against Houston. This is clearly a series or a game tonight that should have a little bit of heat to it based on some of the past postseason performances and just the frustration, I guess, of Dodgers fans maybe losing out to some garbage cans owned by the Astros. But big hitting here, Jake. And I think Valdez is a guy who we've heard talked about a good amount today. Maybe the sharp ownership will drive up a little more. We have him projected at 10% right now on DraftKings. It wouldn't shock me to see him maybe take a little bit off of Sandoval and get there himself or some of these other guys. Dodgers or Houston stacks, Jake, do either jump out to you as being worthwhile, given that we'll have at least some ownership on Valdez and Buehler?
They're not really making my mix here. So it's San Diego and Minnesota for me. I'm recrunching again, so maybe some things change around. But I kind of have interest in both of the pitchers, even though you don't want to face any of these lineups if you can avoid it on a 10-game slate, but you can't really avoid it here. So Buehler and Valdez actually grade out both pretty well for me. The Dodgers stack, did you say they're up to? Oh no, you said Valdez was up to 10% ownership.
Yeah. The Dodgers still, it's only bets. It looks like picking up a ton, but I guess the top four also has about 10%.
Yeah, so I mean they're perfectly fine. I'm never going to say don't stack the Dodgers. I love stacking the Dodgers as much as the next guy, but kind of zeroing in on some other teams tonight. So they're probably just not going to make my cut, and you don't get the big leverage off of Valdez if he's only going to be in this. Let's see, he's only under 10% right now, so.
Also, a quick shout out to Ian McCarthy in the YouTube chat. We always, you guys out there in the YouTube chat who give us some new information or correct us on something when on the rare times that we need that. We appreciate it very much because you're like our little reporters out there. And Ian McCarthy reporting, I'll say, he's our Woj. Ian McCarthy saying that he grew up playing with Tim Lopes and his brother Christian, and it is in fact pronounced Lopes. So you win that round. There you go. The Lopes family proud, getting more talk today than they probably have in any MLB show all season long.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody else jumping out to you as being a worthwhile stack today, Jake? I know there's going to be a good amount of ownership in Boston. We talked about some of the opportunity that you have with the price point of Matt Hall, but still a guy who has not shown much in the majors in the limited sample size he's had, given up a 333 batting average, 2.1 whip, lots of power, especially to lefties, ironically enough, given that he's a lefty. And on the David Peterson side, not a guy who comes in too ballyhooed for going against Boston, especially going against Boston. So these stacks, Jake, do either jump out to you as being worthwhile, or is it just they're adequately owned enough and you don't need to be there?
Oh, they're definitely worthwhile. I like Boston a little bit more, specifically. I like JD, but all the parts that are getting owned are the parts that I want in my two-mans and stuff. So kind of, I wouldn't say I'm not fading this game. I never really intentionally go out of my way to fade stuff, but I kind of just like the two-man stacks here and hope the game doesn't go completely nuts or one side doesn't go completely nuts. I prefer Minnesota over both of these teams. If I can only have one, you can 5-3 stack them if you wanted to go really cheap at pitching. But I prefer Minnesota over both of these teams. But this is the game I feel like is going to blow up in my face here because I don't have enough exposure to it.
Oh, nice. Do you see that little chat? Apparently we set some traffic milestones for Awesemo. I'm getting tagged in our Slack chats, but
what?
Hey, we set I guess a traffic record for the week so good job everybody at Awesemo.
There we go.
I probably should turn off my notifications during a show, but they don't make noise, so it only distracts me. So that's the reason why. I think so. To just kind of close the loop on Boston and the Mets, it's hard to ever really argue against these teams. Though the Mets, I still love the price point for these guys. I know they're coming around, they're hitting better. This lineup today actually does look really good overall. I just can't really see playing expensive Mets as chalk. And that ended up being mostly the right move yesterday, where these guys had really good days for the most part, but you didn't need to have the Mets have a tournament winning lineup. And that's kind of the way I'm feeling again. Like Pete Alonso, I get it at his FanDuel price point, 5,500 on DraftKings. I like Alonso. I think he's a guy who did a good job for me last year. I played him probably more than the field usually did. But at 5,500 and 36% ownership. Like, I'd rather get away from the Mets. I think I'd be more inclined to take Boston if I had to choose.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I prefer Boston, I think, a little bit more as a stack. But man, did something change around in our ownership projections or something in our projections? Because like, I'm still getting some San Diego. I'm getting less Minnesota. Maybe they came up a little bit. But now I'm getting really flat ownership projections. And one team that's, exposures. One team that is popping up for me a little bit that wasn't really on my radar was Oakland. What do you think about them going up against Senzatella? I guess Senzatella, not a guy that misses a ton of bats. And then like I like San Diego. I still like San Diego, mostly because of their power. And it was a tough park. It's a tough park in Oakland, but they still have a bunch of power, and they're pretty cheap as well.
So I'm kind of and this is something that I think last year worked out a good amount, or probably more than it should have. But Senzatella does keep the ball down pretty well. I mean, a 27% fly ball rate, which, in Colorado is a godsend because at least it keeps him, he's not a viable guy to play usually, but he is a guy who I think does tend to limit that stack production. So I wouldn't be crazy about a full Oakland stack. I could see kind of trying to chase those home runs, but that's sort of my feel for Senzatella, is he does keep the ball down enough, and that's why he's sort of stayed on this Rockies roster for as long as he has. But yeah, he certainly doesn't miss bats at all. I mean, he'll get shots. I just don't know that they'll fully materialize in the way you'd hope. I'd rather go San Diego if I had to choose, but I'm glad your projections now know to fear Jeff Samardzija adequately.
No, I don't think they're fearing Samardzija, but I didn't change anything the way I graded out lineups. So something must have switched around a little bit in the ownership projections. I'm assuming a couple guys maybe on Minnesota and San Diego are getting a little more ownership, so it's pushing them down a little bit. And maybe that ownership came off of Oakland that wasn't thrusting them as one of my top stacks, but now they're up there. It's kind of just flatter across the board: Oakland, San Diego, Minnesota, and then I mean those are the main ones. I guess Milwaukee would probably be my fourth stack here.
Let's circle back to Milwaukee too, because I'm curious to hear the thoughts there. And we talked about them a little bit early up top. The look probably of having the Royals with the Brewers on DraftKings is going to be a pretty decently popular one, because that's just the way that soaks up the money. If you are playing the very, very cheap Royals stack for whatever reasons you may. Oakland, I'm looking at Oakland more. I feel like whenever you say to play Oakland, or whenever Oakland pivots around for you, this may just be me again, remembering small sample size things last year. I feel like that ended up being correct sometimes. But, so I'm not going to question you on that, Jake. But either way, I'm just glad less Padres. That's the main thing.
Wait, who was the team you mentioned before?
So Milwaukee. Let's talk Milwaukee here. Not off to a great start for the year for any of these guys. Yelich has a negative WRC plus, which is not usually a good sign, given how he's really about as reliable as can get. The rest of these guys, at the bottom of the order, actually doing a little better than the top of the order so far. But we do know guys like Hura should be able to turn this around. Not as much of a lefty masher as you would think, but Hura, nice price point, I feel like, and does seem like he's due to turn things around a little bit more. Hard to ever argue against against Christian Yelich, especially going against Derek Holland, even if he is a lefty. Yelich does have pretty good lefty power, shockingly high, a lefty isolated power, 287 there. So I like the Brewers. I do feel like they're going to be very highly owned, but I think the full stacks, maybe that's one way to get a little different. It does seem like it's largely going to go to a Hura, Yelich, Braun grouping. But Milwaukee, where are you with the field here? Do you feel like they're worth, getting to those 5-mans, or is just that chalky 3-man enough to scare you off?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to have a ton of 5-mans here of Milwaukee, because it is, once again, it is the guys that I want to play that are popular. So I'm getting them more as 2-mans, and just, again, hoping they're not going to be the stack that kills me here. Man, even Yelich, maybe people have just gotten way better at MLB DFS, but usually we get an ownership projection much lower, on a guy like Yelich when they're facing a lefty and he's priced up like this on DK, but he's going to be one of the more popular guys, over 20% in our ownership projections here for Christian Yelich. So that's how I would play it. But it worries me a little bit that the field is doing that same thing, because people hate lefty, and in general, people hate lefty, especially when it's expensive here. So I thought you might get left out in the optimizer. Looks like that's not the case. Maybe it's because the pitching at the top is kind of non-existent. So, Milwaukee, like I said, they're up there. They're in my top 5 for sure. But just not like a slam dunk top stack here. And I would try to avoid getting them in like a 5-3 with KC if you can, unless it's really somehow contrarian.
Yeah, and that's definitely the main thing I feel like we've drilled home today. So keep that in mind. And yeah, as Jake mentioned, Yelich's ownership is going to be pretty high on DraftKings, 20% for a day in which he's in a lefty-lefty matchup. And Derek Holland, not great by any stretch, but still normally people do eschew those same-handed matchups, even though Yelich is a beast. So it's not the case today. So you're really not getting much leverage going to the Brewers on any construct, but especially that Royals Brewers one. Somebody in the chat, I just missed it. Somebody who's really just touting the Cardinals. Oh, Jeremiah Johnson, one of our regulars here, saying that the Cardinals are the move today, going against Homer Bailey, a guy who sort of saved his career last year. Now he's on Minnesota. I mean, I looking at his numbers again, I felt like living through last year. I was like, oh, Homer Bailey's having a pretty good year. He really didn't have that good of a year. He had a better year relative to being Homer Bailey, but still not that great. Going against the Cards team who does have a lot of dangerous hitters. I feel like Goldschmidt, DeJong in particular, looking pretty good generally and this year. I didn't get any cards, but going against Homer Bailey, never a bad move by any stretch. And Jake, you predict that the Twins are going to have a decent power production here, or you felt like they have a chance to do that. So this Cardinals side, does it feel underrepresented to you?
Not necessarily. Like Bailey's not that bad. And it was nice to see Adam and Alex kind of agree with that. He hasn't given up as much power last season compared to what he was a few years ago when it was just auto stack against Bailey, basically every slate. Cardinals lineup, it's cheap. It's okay. The one guy I do like quite a bit is Edman, batting second here. Switch hitter, dual position eligibility. He's fitting in a few of my lineups as one-offs. But outside of him, I don't have too many 5-mans or 4-mans of these St. Louis Cardinals. So I'll probably be left out of the party if this the guy in chat is right here.
Yeah, I agree. Like Homer Bailey, I think was a disaster the year before last. Last year sort of leveled it out. Had some usable days, had some days where he was still Homer Bailey, but I think it may still be one of those things that people hold where he's a guy to stack against. There was definitely a period where you would love to stack against Homer Bailey more often than not, but he's sort of leveled out here, and I don't know that I believe enough in a full Cardinal stack to get there, but I get what you're going for with it, and the ownership seems fair. Like I think if you were with the field on the ownership, that would seem about right to me. Nobody too chalky, so you're not getting too crazy going there. Anything else you're seeing, Jake, in your final crunches that are worth bringing to the people here, as we have about 6 minutes left before the slate locks on DraftKings, and it's a little bit later as well on SuperDraft today if you are playing on there.
Yeah, Merrill Kelly, and he shot up a little bit in my exposures. I have 46% of him on DK right now. I might play around with that and get a little bit less, but I was trying to get no pitcher above like in the 40% range in my head. And then him and then Bueller, I have 40% of too. So those guys worry me, but at least Bueller we know is good, even if he's on a pitch count. Like you're looking for 5 innings and relatively clean. That's tough to do against Houston, and hopefully he's not beating people out there. I don't think he will, but that's kind of where I'm at for my top pitchers. Megnan has crept up there for me as well. He's under 10% ownership. In our projections, I'm at over 25% right now of Megnan. And then the hitters, just to kind of run through again, Minnesota, San Diego, Oakland, and Milwaukee are kind of my top 4 here.
So we got a few minutes left here, and I feel like this is our time. We can put it all on the line, Jake. But which chalk option today do you think is the one most likely to blow up in people's faces? And I feel like we're both going to agree it's got to be Sandoval. But I'm going to say it's got to be Sandoval, right?
Yeah, we haven't even I haven't even talked about Sandoval much. I don't have any of him right now. Is this right? Hold on. Can this be correct? I don't have any Patrick Sandoval. Yeah, I don't have any. So I'm playing 50 lineups tonight. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but did not make any of my top 50 lineups here. So I'm just going with anyone not named Sandoval. If he busts, I'm or even disappoints, I'm probably in an okay spot just by getting a different line of construction or getting a few players away from what a lot of these optimal lineups are going to look like, including using our projections. So just something to be aware of if you are playing a bunch of Sandoval here.
Yeah, I mean, I think just seeing the ownership number, like Josh James yesterday, we saw the big numbers. We talked about them. I think that was the one you could talk yourself into a little bit more. And Sandoval, 25% K rate is not a bad number by any stretch, but going against the Seattle team who literally just blew up the chalk pitcher yesterday, I think some cause for concern with that process. And anytime you see a guy who's going to be half owned at pitcher and he has questionable stuff, or at least stuff that you could poke holes in, definitely not the worst idea to either come in under the field, or if you want to just play it super safe, just don't have more than 50% of Sandoval in your lineups, because that's why he's going to smoke everybody tonight. But I still would agree, you shouldn't have 75% Sandoval, because what's the point?
Right. I mean, you still have to beat still half the field if he does well. So I'm okay losing if Sandoval goes for 25 DK or 50 on FanDuel, whatever it is. That's fine. I don't think he should probably be chalk on this slate. It looks like he's major chalk. So I actually I got to a couple of Seattle stacks as well in my 50 lineups on DK. So feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, that is the wise move to, just if you're putting in, like Jake said, he's playing 50 lineups tonight. I played 20. Like, I think, for us, it was important to get in there. So certainly if you're playing 150, I would try to get a couple different looks at Seattle here, because you just don't know. And except you do know, because we saw this exact same scenario yesterday with a better pitcher. And that's just how it goes sometimes here. Checking all the chats for any questions. If you have anything, get it in now, but make sure you're finishing up your lineups as well, because there's not a ton of time left. And also EMAC, I don't think I mentioned that he took Matt Olson. So for your home run picks, if you want somebody to fade, because EMAC used all his good luck in witchcraft last year, his pick for the day is Matt Olson. So let me put that on.
I really like that pick. Matty O. Yeah, he's one of my highest.
Of course you do, you athletics lover, you.
Yeah, he's one of my highest owned guys.
Selling out the Minnesota Jakes for your power needs.
I do like a little bit of power on the baseball field.
And off.
Well, that's a different conversation for a different day.
Our boy McCod asking who could be the Paul Blackburn of the night. Of course, the historical award that goes to a garbage pitcher people won't be playing a bunch, but could somehow find his way into a winning lineup. I think it's got to be Hall would be my guess, just based off of price. But for me, it's Jeff Samardzija.
All right. Yeah, I'll probably take Hall. He's like the highest owned punt I have. I've got him at 16%, 8 out of my 50. I like how this came together. Let's see, do I have any of these other dusters? Well, Mengden, I don't think Mengden's actually that bad. So if he counts, I'll say Mengden. But if you're just going pure punt, give me like 3 or 4 innings of the sub 5K guy.
Our boy Andrew Mock in the YouTube chat saying that Lindblom is the Blackburn of the night. Interesting call. I think being away, trusting a guy coming in from the KBO and having 22% ownership would be a bit terrifying. But yeah, honestly, I might be willing to take that stab. The thing is, the Pirates just don't strike out enough. But I guess this lineup they have tonight, 4 guys over league average in strikeouts. So maybe they are adding some more guys. Good old J.R. Murphy in the mix for them now too. He'll always offer up either a 2-run or multi-home run game, or he'll strike out 4 times. Very little in between.
That's right.
All right, guys, we are locked now, so we appreciate all of you watching. There is the NBA Restart Special coming up in just about 10 minutes, I believe. Josh Laffey, Greg Ehrenberg, 3 great guys, going to have they'll have an entertaining show as well as an educational show with both Josh Laffey and as well as Greg Ehrenberg, a really sharp guy if you're not familiar with yet. You will be getting familiar with him this year in NBA. He's going to be worth a lot of your attention, so check that out. Make sure you're also playing on SuperDraft. Their tournaments are still going on, so you can take advantage of the deal that we have going on over there. If you use the promo code Awesemo10, the promo code Awesemo10 will get you $10 free with your deposit of $10 or more. If you put down $100 or more, you can get yourself $20 free in super cash, and that money goes to you right away. You can use it, play in tournaments. All you have to do is win a tournament or cash, and you can take it right back out. Make sure to take advantage of it by going to superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store, because at SuperDraft, there are no limits, more winning. And of course, make sure to take advantage of that restart promo code. Awesemo.com/join will get you half off your first month. The promo code restart, get all the MLB data, NBA data, PGA, going to have a bigger tournament than expected this week. MMA still going on, lots to play if you use that promo code restart. And I'm Chris Spags. Jake, any parting words for you before we call it quits and run it back tomorrow?
Good luck, everybody. See you back here in 24 hours.
And we'll be back, me and the Baseball Savant tomorrow. Enjoy your night. Stay tuned for Josh Laffey and Greg Ehrenberg, and wish you guys the best of luck tonight. See you soon.